been talking to myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on that.
Good afternoon and welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith, and I'm delighted to welcome Jake Burns to NUFC Matters today to talk Newcastle United and Stiff Little Fingers, one of my favourite groups, and I'm sure a lot of our regular viewers' favourite groups as well. Welcome to the show, Jake.
Thanks, mate. Good to see you.
Good to have you on, and we're just talking off air before we came on. We're all temporary, and I mean very temporary, Leeds supporters last night, but they did do us a favour against Fulham.
Huge favour. I mean, it was one of those things. I was kind of watching it out of one corner of my eye on a texting because I was doing some work. But yeah, when they went ahead, I was like, get in. Then like 2 minutes later, I turned around and I was like, oh, shit, it's fucking equalised. But yeah, it's ridiculous. Like we were saying before we came on air, that we're like, still like 9 odd games to go, and we're already worried about other teams' results. It's not great.
Typical Newcastle, Jake. Typical Newcastle. That's probably the best way to describe it. And I mean, the stuff that we talk about on the show night after night is. I've got to be honest. Last weekend, I didn't watch the match. It had got us that down, and I think probably during lockdown, we've all had that kind of, moment where you're just sick of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to understand. You go week after week, and it's the lack of desire to win, I think, is what's ground everybody down. And I'm not a football person beyond just being a fan, but there's a lot of head scratchers in terms of why does he keep playing players out of position? Why does he, when we come up against winnable teams, why doesn't he try and win? And but I mean, I'm not saying anything that anybody else hasn't said, so
No, definitely not. I mean, how did you fall in love with Newcastle United, Jake? I suppose is my first question.
I blame a couple of mates from 2002. I moved up to Newcastle from London in 87 or 88. I married a lass there, and I mean, I've always been a football fan. It's like I'd never really had any specific team. People always point back to photographs of me in a Liverpool shirt, and that's a hangover from an uncle I had. He was a huge football fan, and he had like 5 daughters and 1 son, and the son wasn't interested in football. So he would go every week on a Friday, he'd get his pay packet, and he'd either go to Liverpool or Glasgow, depending on where the boat went. And he had season tickets at Anfield and at Parkhead. And this was like in the 60s when just before Celtic won the European Cup. So he would bring me back programmes. And I was in, and he said I was in prison. I was in hospital getting me tonsils out, and the 65 Cup final was on, and Liverpool won, and I knew my uncle was at the game, so like most 7-year-olds, that was it. I was a Liverpool fan, but never actually. You didn't see them on a regular basis. When I lived in London, I had a season ticket at Fulham, just again because they were my local team, and I wanted to see football, so I moved to Newcastle, and. They were in the second division at the time. Ian McFall was in charge. And I just had a mate who was like, sort of, he managed to get a couple of managed to get a couple of tickets. And he's like, do you want to come along to the game? Like, yeah, absolutely, And it was one of those things, they kind of get under your skin. And I think bizarrely, it was because they struggled. Now that's something we moan about. But then it was like, when you weren't 100% committed, that was hugely entertaining. It was like it's on the knife edge every week. Now, of course, you tear your bloody hair out. But then it was like, then it was actually entertaining. It's like, oh, they're going to pull this off. They're going to manage to get out of it. And of course, then we went through the Jim Smith, the Aussie Ardealers period, and of course, eventually Kevin arrived, and that was, undoubtedly the most exciting period of football I've ever watched in my life. And I think that that's the same for a lot of us. And I think it was also because it was unexpected, It did come out of the blue, but it was the style of the football, the fact that we were everybody's favorite, second favorite team. It was the whole entertainers thing that came slightly later, but it was even in that second division, sort of when the likes of David Kelly and Mark McGee and all that, it was still, they played football like it was getting towards football out of a dream almost. It was like. It was just great to watch. It was like, so this is what you can do if you let the brakes off. Now, of course, we've got the polar fucking opposite, you know.
It's interesting you say that because I mean it's something I've touched on a few times on the show, but it's ultimately Newcastle, Sunderland, probably the same, have always been the team that's been in and around mid-table in the second division or fighting a relegation battle in the top flight. Never really been a team that challenges at the top. So the Keegan era, which Paul Merson today has accused us of bleating on about, we're still stuck in that particular time warp, is essentially really, that is the blip, isn't it? That is the blip in our history, so I suppose, apart from 1927, of course, when neither of us were alive when Hughie Gallagher and the boys won the league. But other than that, we've always been perennial strugglers or in the old second division.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, obviously, Bobby Robson got us close again, but that Keegan period was definitely, like you said, it was a blip, and I think I mean, this whole thing baffles me about the media's attitude towards Newcastle fans. You know, that we demand too much, and we sort of, you know, like you said, you know, it was a blip. We haven't ever demanded Champions League football every year. In fact, recently, whenever, you know, when Pardew got us into the Europa League, I was really nervous on it. We haven't got a squad for this, you know. It's like, whereas, you know, every other team in the country were like, we're in Europe. You know, I was like, oh, this is a bad move. This is a bad move. And you know, I think most fans are the same. It's like, you know, that famous War Flags banner. You know, so we don't demand a team that wins, we demand a team that tries, and that's always been the way, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I still celebrate the Japan Cup in 1982, which Kevin Keegan held above his head, and the Intertoto Cup, which was hurriedly given to Scott Parker on the sidelines. I mean, other than that, we've won absolutely sweet FA, you know, and apart from that beloved championship trophy, which I think we should probably be given now just out of sympathy, because it's probably the only thing we're ever going to win, you know. We've got questions coming in. Just touch a little bit on the band. I mean, what a band. Stiff Little Fingers. Obviously, you know, for those people who watch and watch this back, who don't know who the band are, Irish punk rock band from Belfast, Northern Ireland, formed in 1977 at the height of the Troubles, and a big punk band, and a one which has really, for me, stood the test of time. You know, it's up there with, you know, your band for me has always been up there with like the Sex Pistols, who, you know, are never far from my listening material. I always like to go back to that kind of thing, and fantastic, mate. I mean, just tell us a little bit about the formation of the band. And well, yeah, I mean, like I said, the Troubles were sort of raging around us at the time, and as a consequence, bands didn't come and play. You know, Rory Gallagher would come every year, bless him, and the odd band. But I actually do remember I went to see Lindisfarne on Cup Final Day in '74. Seriously, brilliant. They played Belfast, and of course, you know, when we saw the result, it was like, oh, they're going to be shite tonight. Oh, they're going to be really deflated, you know. But bless them, they came on and they were great, and they tried to curry favour with the crowd by sort of mentioning Tommy Cassidy, of course, was a Northern Ireland international. Just got a chorus of "He's a wanker" from the crowd, which was unfair on Tommy, but there you go. Like I said, bands rarely came and played, and so when we, you know, as sort of teenagers, sort of really were heavily into music, and we realised the only way we were probably going to hear this music live was to do it ourselves, and that really was the reason we formed the band. You know, it was just for fun. And I mean, we got stuck with the name as well. I've never liked the name. We got stuck with the name because the first gig we did was in a pub in Ballyhackamore in Belfast, and we got a really good review in a local paper. And reviews were like gold dust. You know, if you got a good review, that meant you could go to another pub or promoter and go, "Look, we're good. It says here in the paper." And that would get you shows. So we were like stuck with this bloody name, and it's, you know, I've never liked it. But you don't forget it. Although people do get it wrong. We did a series of festivals in Australia a few years ago with Green Day. So it's like, you know, thousands of fucking people there. And this local guy goes on and goes, you know, here they are, first time ever in Brisbane, Sticky Little Fingers. One of those things, I suppose. Yeah, we had that a little bit with the Longsands who do our opening song. I managed the Longsands for a while from Newcastle, and they used to get the long shanks, the long staffs.
Oh yeah,
they had it all. But it can be it can be frustrating. Highway Star was, of course, the first name, wasn't it? Which I think was named after a Deep Purple song, if I'm right.
It was, yeah. I mean, that was very much a school band. We only played a couple of shows out, and we were exactly that. We were school kids. We were dead nervous. We were almost as nervous about being in a pub when we were underage as we were about playing in front of people, But yeah, that was kind of cutting your teeth and learning your trade a bit, was what that was,
Yeah, I think one of the people who a lot of people back in a certain era, the 70s, have to hold a lot of thanks to John Peel, and of course I guess your band's no different, mate, because he was somebody who supported up and coming bands, new music, and is it right that a copy of your single was sent to John Peel and he played it and liked it?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. I mean, yeah, Peel was hugely important. I mean, like you said, not just for us, but I mean, I would claim for bands going all the way back to the 60s. He was the first person to play the likes of Pink Floyd and stuff on the radio. So it wasn't, he wasn't just a champion of punk bands. He was a champion of new music whenever it happened to be, And I mean, it was one of those weird things, like a kid, you dream about making a record and you think, if I make a record, John Peel will like it. And and immediately he did, and he played, and that was surreal hearing that voice, because it was such a famous voice to you, if you were a fan, to hear him announce the name of your band on the radio. And at the time, we'd obviously had the records pressed up professionally, but we didn't have the sleeves made professionally. So we had a mate at a local college who was photocopying these things, and they just came on an A4 sheet, and we had to cut them out, fold them and glue them together and stick the records in them. So we'd press ganged all our girlfriends in, and it was like a conveyor belt. It was like one person cut them out, one person folded them, one person stuck them together, one person put the records in. And we were sitting listening to Peel while we were doing this. So it's like you had a day job at the time. So you'd go to work during the day, come home at night, go over to our manager's flat and sit and glue these bloody things together all night. And I mean, we suddenly started selling hundreds of them because Peel was playing them. So we're sitting listening to Peel and gluing these things together, and he plays the record again while we're listening, and we're like, "Will you stop playing that fucking thing? I'm sick of putting these bloody things together."
Brilliant. Well, it's good though. I mean, that's how it starts, I suppose. I mean, and that led to the band getting more recognition and obviously taking off. And I think he did the same with the Undertones as well, didn't he? And of course, there was a much publicised rivalry between the two bands. I mean, was the rivalry as big as it was made out in the press?
Not from my point of view. No, we barely crossed paths, to be honest with you. I mean, I think I went backstage to see them once and wasn't welcomed with open arms, so I didn't bother again. But no, I mean, as far as I was concerned, it was, I've never had a problem with them. I perfectly understood their attitude, because I mean, the main thing was basically they didn't see the point in writing songs about the Troubles because they'd all lived through it. And as far as they were concerned, if you went out for a night, you wanted to forget about that, And I perfectly understood that. I mean, it made perfect sense to me. And I agreed with it up to a point, but the trouble was I'm not built like that. If I see a problem, I'm going to complain about it. So that was the main difference between the two bands,
Yeah, I mean, in those early days as well, you had your own label, didn't you? Rigid Digits label, for bands, I suppose nowadays as well, a lot of them think that getting that big record deal with a big name or with a big label is the thing that they need to aspire to. But there's a lot to be said, isn't there, from having your own label and just doing it yourself if you can get your material out there.
Yeah, I mean, you've obviously got a huge amount more control over what you're doing. I mean, we were lucky in so much as when we signed with Chrysalis, by that stage, we'd already had the hit album, so we could dictate what we wanted, So we didn't actually go for the big advance, which, to be honest, is just a loan. I mean, it puts you in debt, and that's how they get you to do what they want you to do, But so we were able to dictate basically terms that said, we want, we get to make the records, you get to sell them. That's it. So we were about the only band in the world that never had record company people down at the studio sticking their nose in. We told them what the singles were going to be. We told them how to promote them. Well, we didn't actually tell them how to promote them. That's a lie. That was their job. But we had final say on what the sleeves looked like and at the time there was a big fad for coloured vinyl and picture discs and stuff. And we actually had written in our contract that unless we say so, all records will be black and round and 7 inches for singles and 12 inches for albums. And my girlfriend at the time was studying law at Cambridge University, of all places. And she came back to me one day and she said, "My professor's just talking about you in a lecture. You've made legal history with that clause." I went, "You're joking." Well, there you go.
Brilliant. I mean, some bands and some musicians like to tour, others don't. What was your take on getting out there and playing live gigs in front of your fans?
Oh, that's what the band lives for. I mean, that's why this lockdown's been so difficult, Steve. It's what we do best. I mean, I think we've made some decent records over the years, but they don't really capture what it's like being in a room with a couple of thousand other people really getting into it. And I mean, the band pick up on that, and that takes everything to a different level. I mean, playing live is everything for a band, particularly a band like us. I mean, other bands that that rely on studios almost as an instrument. I can see that them not being overly happy on going out. But for us, it's the whole reason. If it wasn't for the audience, you wouldn't have a job. So why wouldn't you want to go out and meet them? I mean, famously, we also had in our live contracts, we had a clause that said we would stay behind and meet people and sign stuff if they wanted to do that. And we eventually had to dump it because we put it in the contract when we were playing clubs, and it was easy enough to hang. We weren't doing Top of the Pops and all that sort of thing, so it was easy enough to hang around. Only 50 people wanted stuff signing. But once you get to even where we are today, the likes of the Academy in the town where like 2,000 people are there, and all 2,000 of them are going to want to hang about and get shit signed afterwards. It got to the stage where the bouncers were like, "Will you buggers fuck off? We want to go to bed." So I mean, that was the main reason that we stopped doing it. It's like these folk were, and some of them were really patient, but you get into like 1:30 in the morning, you're like, "Oh, for fuck's sake!" It's like these lads want to get to bed, So.
Yeah. Top of the Pops, you mentioned it there. I mean, obviously, there's that infamous. You say you weren't doing Top of the Pops. There was a reason. I mean, you went on and just didn't like the fact that you couldn't play live, like a lot of people. I mean, people didn't realise that you had to mime. And I mean, the old Top of the Pops get played back now on some of these cable channels. It's always fun to watch because you can see those taking it seriously and those going, "It's rubbish, this," and deliberately doing it. And you were in that crowd, weren't you?
Yeah, we never took it. Well, it was difficult to take seriously, I mean, I actually had an on-air conversation with, of all people, a guy called Robin Nash, who was he had been the producer of Top of the Pops and was now like head of music, I think, for the BBC. And he was very, very posh. He had like sort of handlebar moustache, and he always wore a bow tie and stuff, he was probably a very nice guy, but I just thought he was a wanker. And the BBC at the time had 2 music programs: the Top of the Pops and the Old Grey Whistle Test. And you weren't allowed to play live on Top of the Pops. You had to mime, and they had an audience. You were allowed to play live on the Old Grey Whistle Test, and they didn't have an audience. You're like, "You're doing this all fucking wrong, mate." It's like you should have the audience in front of people that are playing live. But then equally, as more and more, like I said earlier about bands that use the studio as an instrument, and particularly since the likes of auto-tune has come in. So you've got people that can't really sing, and they're relying on the studio to save their necks. More and more, even the record labels were like, because Top of the Pops then introduced this thing after our time, where you would play the backing track and the singer could sing live. And more record labels were like, "Oh, Jesus, don't let him sing live. He can't do it." So it was like, well, what the fuck's he doing making records for then?
Did you ever get to meet Legs and Co? That's the big question.
Show you my age. They were pants fucking people then. No, I think they were Legs and Co. Yeah, we like every other band in the world, we always seem to manage to find ourselves in the studio when they were rehearsing. Yeah. Don't know how that happened. Don't know how that happened.
Couldn't happen now. It's against all kinds of regulations and not very PC. But yeah, if you're a younger persuasion and you're watching this show, check out Legs and Co. There's plenty of videos of them on YouTube. I mean, obviously the band did eventually split, and you know, I mean, was that just progression and you'd done everything you wanted to do, and you just thought we'll call it a day with the band not getting on? What was the reason behind that?
Bit of both, to be honest with you. I mean, yeah, we weren't getting on terribly well. There's no point in hiding that. I mean, it's fairly well documented that, you know, things that would have been just, you know, arguments before were turning into fist fights and stuff. And yeah, we were pulling in different directions as well, I think. You know, Henry still wanted to make Ramones records. I was trying to pull in another direction. Ali was listening to a lot of soul music, and, you know, we were a lot of things, but there was no way we could have pulled off being James Brown, you know. So, and also the audience had changed. I mean, the music scene the landscape had changed. You know, the Spandau Ballets and the Duran Durans of this world were kind of the hot thing at the time, and guitar bands were famously being told you were done. You know, I mean, guitar bands have been told they were done since the Beatles, for God's sake. So, what we didn't think through was everything is in the music business is cyclical. It goes in cycles, and if we'd just waited a while, you know, I mean, I remember our drummer at the time, Dolphin, said to me, "Look, you should go off and just make a solo record or something. Shelve the band for a year." But the thought of that was like, I couldn't come to terms with that. You know, I thought, well, if I write songs, I write them for the band, you know. But that probably would have been a smart thing to do, just to take a step back, because again, you know, almost exactly that time, I remember talking to Stuart Adamson, and he had just formed Big Country. And we had the whole, you know, do you think guitar bands are done? And I was like, no, mate, your band sounds great, you know. But they really struggled to get a record deal, which is ridiculous when you think back now, you know. And,
yeah.
You know, yeah, I mean, you know, if somebody as talented as that and a band as good as that was having trouble, it gives you an idea where the music, you know, the actual business's head was, you know.
You talk about collaborations. I mean, you did do a few demos, didn't you, with Bruce Foxton from The Jam, another one of my favourite bands.
At the time.
I mean, do you ever regret not getting something? I mean, I know that you formed, you know, you became part of the band later on for a short stint. But yeah. Do you not regret maybe taking those on? What were the demos like? Were they good?
They weren't bad. I mean, we were offered a record deal straight away just on the strength of the names of the people in the band. And yeah, I mean, that is a regret. I think, you know, that really could have worked. But at the time, Bruce was offered a solo deal, and he wanted to try and test himself on that. And I mean, I think, you know, the Arista deal that he was offered was just a little bit further down the road than the deal we were being offered, because we were still talking in very vague terms with Chrysalis. Although the deal we were being offered was much better than the solo deal he signed, I thought. But I was involved in our deal. I wasn't involved in his solo deal. But I mean, at the time, he had a very high profile manager. He was being looked after by Sally James, who used to do Tiswas, if you remember her.
Oh yeah.
and I think her husband. And so, you know, they were getting meetings a lot easier than anybody else was, just simply because, again, of the names involved. But, you know, he wanted to do that, and fair play to him. I mean, he also said to me at the time, he said, look, you know, I've just come out of a 3-piece band where the singer wrote all the fucking songs, and I'm not sure I'm ready to do that again. So, you know. And he went and he did it. And, you know, I mean, I think his first album did okay. And then he called me up when he was writing the second album. And he said, will you come and look at the band? He said, I'm struggling with the songwriting. So I went and watched them, and the idea was I was going to help him write some songs for the second album. And then I think they pulled the plug on that, so it didn't go any further. But, you know, we'd always been friends. So, you know, getting Bruce involved when Ali left was a no-brainer as far as I was concerned. It's like, you know, he's a mate. We know he can play, you know. we know he's not going to freak out when you play the Welly Club in Hull in terms of the big audience, you know. I think he can handle that, you know.
I mean, as I mentioned, you got back together, the band reformed. I mean, it was supposed to be a temporary one, wasn't it? But I mean, I think you sold out a tour, sold out a tour in Germany, and you just decided, well, that's it, you know, let's get back together. I mean, was it as good second time round as it was the first time round? Did the break do the band good?
It did. I mean, obviously personnel have moved on since then, but that's just natural wastage, really. But yeah, it did. I mean, and I think particularly now, having been doing it for such a long time, that that old expression, sort of take the time to step back and smell the roses. So we kind of do that a bit more now, because back then it really was all very much sort of, oh, we're going on tour to America, smash it, get the beers in, and we didn't really pay any attention to where we were. It was all a bit of a whirlwind. Whereas now, if you're going somewhere, you kind of do look around yourself more, and you just enjoy it more, I think, And I do think we were always pretty professional. We were never sort of your smash the hotel up and make clowns of yourself type of band. Although there was a little bit of that occasionally, but we were always pretty professional in terms of our approach to it. But I think we've become even more so now. It does come a point where it becomes a well-oiled machine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it does.
It's more ways than one sometimes.
We're going to take a few questions now. We'll post the questions up on Twitter. And Kev Egan says, ask Jake if there's any plans for any new tunes, hopefully for a 2022 tour. I mean, obviously a lot of other artists and bands, etc., have been releasing stuff, and releasing it from their homes, etc., and writing stuff. Have you been doing the same?
We've been writing, certainly, yeah. I mean, we've definitely got at least more than half an album's worth. But to be honest with you, the problem we've got is, again, not touring, because what we always do with new material is we try it out on the road first, and you see what works and what doesn't. I mean, and that can come down to things like we're overdoing the chorus at that point, bump that one out. We can afford to do the middle section twice. We can't afford to. It's the audience are getting bored at this point. You learn a lot of things about material when you work it on the road, and having that denied to us has made progressing the material difficult. We can write it, and we've all got little recording setups at home, and so we send stuff to each other all the time, and but the thing is, at the moment, we're the only 4 sounding boards we've got. It really works better when you do it in front of an audience. I mean, our drummer has actually gone off and made an album on his own. I think he's done a couple, but it just through the lockdown he's done one completely because under the banner of RTZ, and I mean that's great, because the stuff he's writing for that wouldn't really suit the band, but it gets it's an outlet for him to do it, and that keeps him happy. And it goes back to what I was saying about us splitting up the first time. If we'd have had that sort of outlet, maybe we would have been happier and stuck together. With regards to touring, yeah, I mean, as soon as we can get the all clear to travel and the vaccinations and whatever, then we're all chomping at the bit to get back.
Yeah. Paul Shank says, At the Edge was the first single I bought. What was Jake's first single? He just says you're a top class band.
Well, thank you. The first single I bought, Jesus, we were talking about being old earlier. I'm getting to the stage where you're going to think you could have seen Huey Gallagher, you old bastard. I think the first single I bought was Pretty Flamingo by Manfred Mann. And that's going way back. When was that? 67, 68, something like that. So I would have been like 8 or 9 years old. But the records I mainly bought when I was that age were all Tamla Motown records. That was kind of that tended to be. I mean, that wasn't a deliberate thing. It was just I really liked pop songs, and they were like the best pop songs on the radio at the time. And I still love them to this day, which is great. It's but yeah, that was the first single I bought. The first album I bought was Led Zeppelin 2, and I bought that with Christmas money. And again, I think the week it came out. And then fast forward many years, and I was doing a TV program, I think called Pop Quiz with Mike Reid, and one of the guests on it was Robert Plant from Led Zeppelin. And before you go in, they give you this questionnaire to fill in, so you don't look like an idiot. It's like and it is questions like, what was the first record you bought, and who are your favorite bands. So they ask you questions based on that, so you don't look like a clown when you're on the telly. So obviously somebody had told Mr. Plant that one of the other contestants, the first album he bought was Led Zeppelin 2. So I'm standing in the green room with one of the lads from the record company, and the door opens, And in walks Robert Plant, and he's standing at the other side of the room. And at the top of his voice, he goes, "Who was the idiot who bought my record down?" I went, "Oh, that'll be me. That'll be me." So that was my introduction to a rock legend.
Brilliant stuff. Steve Suggett, you asked the question how Jake became a Newcastle fan. We asked that at the start of the show, mate. You got your answer there. Billy Trey says, "My two best mates at school were massive Stiff Little Fingers fans while I was Two-Tone Man, being from Coventry. Then you worked with Jerry on a superb version of Doesn't Make It All Right. How did that come about?"
We didn't actually work with Jerry. I knew him because we were on the same label, but yeah, what it was, we were fans of the Specials. We used to go and see them as much as we could. And then, of course, the Two-Tone label signed itself to Chrysalis. So suddenly we found ourselves as label mates. And they were great fellas. I mean, we got on really well with them. And I'd always loved the song. I mean, having seen it live. And it was really powerful live. And then we got pre-release copies of the album. And as much as I'm a huge Elvis Costello fan, I didn't like the production on that one song. It was just because that was the song I was really looking forward to hearing. I loved it live, and it sounded really thin, and it just didn't sound. It didn't convince me as much as the live version did. And I'm like, okay, that song deserves more than that. And so that was the main reason we did it. And I remember talking to Brad, the drummer, and they were. Like I said, their record was about to come out, and we were in the studio recording ours. And I actually said to him, jokingly, I said, "We're going to try and get ours out before you and steal your thunder." And we didn't quite manage that. But that shows you the sort of mates we are. Hey, what do you think of our new record? Brilliant, we're going to nick it. Brilliant.
Tom Dixon says, "Why is punk so important?" Craig, that's a bit deep for a Saturday afternoon, Tom, but why is punk so important, Jake?
Saturday morning, yeah.
Saturday morning for you.
Yeah. I got today's a 3:00 Saturday kickoff. That never fucking happens. Why is it so important? I mean, I think a lot of it. I think one of the reasons it's lasted so long is because a lot of the bands. A lot of the bands were honest. I mean, for all that, there was that rock and roll swindle stuff around the Sex Pistols. They were honest about it. I mean, they even named an album after it, for God's sake. But I think it was, it was genuinely a movement from the streets. I mean, it was, a lot of the bands could barely play, but what it did show was, even bands that couldn't play particularly well, the amount of imagination and the amount of creativity among young people at the time was incredible, because, like I said, in bands that couldn't play very well and maybe only had one song in them, a lot of the times it was a bloody great song. The number of bands who made one great single and then disappeared is legion. There's loads of them, and I think that's one of the reasons. Is it's a simple music to play, much like early rock and roll was. It really is 3 chords on a guitar and away you go, and I disliked it whenever it became restricted around the time we split up, when there was like a second or third wave of bands, and it became more about the number of studs on your leather jacket rather than what you were singing about, and that it started to bore me then. But in terms of creativity, like I said, you don't need a grade 7 in music from music school to be able to play it, and I think that's a huge part of its appeal.
Yeah, okay. Gary Milligan and Paul Oxley ask a similar question. Gary says, "Hi Jake, who do you listen to now?" And Paul Oxley says, "Who in your opinion is the best band in the world today?"
Ooh, I'll take the first one. It's easier. Who I listen to now? I'm pretty much banned from anytime we're on a tour bus, like the ones that you live on, not just the ones you go from Leeds to Middlesbrough in, but the ones you actually live on. I'm banned from anywhere near the music deck whenever we're traveling overnight, because it's like, don't let him near it. It's all he ever plays is old dead black guys. So, which is pretty much true. It's like, so I've found myself going back and listening to age-old blues music and stuff like that. And it's all over the map, to be honest. I mean, I just ordered a couple of old Planksty records I didn't know existed. So like Irish folk music, old blues music. I mean, I do listen to some new artists. I'm not completely, cut off from the world, but it tends to be older, obscure stuff that I listen to. The best band in the world. Jesus, that's tricky. You know, I mean, the best band in the world. The definition of that is down to every person individually, because there's your favorite band in the world, and then there's the most successful band in the world. You know, I've seen bands who are brilliant at what they do, and I don't particularly like what they do, but I can appreciate Jesus. I can see why they're huge. You know, they're great. But I think the best band in the world today is a matter of personal taste. You know, and like I said, I'm not big on modern young people's music, so I don't listen to a lot of it at home.
Yeah, I think my own personal opinion is a lot of the modern day music isn't worth listening to. But I think that's just part of getting older. Unfortunately, you tend to listen to a lot of stuff, older stuff.
Before you know it, you become your dad. You know, oh, sounds a bloody same. What are you listening to that crap for?
That's it. John Askew says, "Are you playing in Sunderland in July? I've heard a rumour."
Yeah, the Kubiks Festival. Yeah, at the moment, yes. That's going to be the first. That should be the first thing on the calendars. But like I said earlier, you know, it all depends on vaccines and travel restrictions and that sort of thing. I mean, I spent an hour on the computer yesterday trying to get a vaccination for myself, because they've only just gotten around to releasing them for my age group in Chicago. You know, it all depends on travel. I mean, I know that the festival's going ahead, but the vast majority of the bands that are playing it are UK based, so it's easy for them to get there. I mean, from our point of view, two of us live here. You know, I'm in Chicago, Ian is in Los Angeles, and so it really is down to travel restrictions. I know we can get into the UK, but we'd be then stuck in a hotel for 10 days. So that's, you know, two of us. That's going to eat into your fee for a start, and then I'm not sure what the travel restrictions on getting back into the US are. So, you know, until all of that stuff's sorted, it's kind of up in the air. But at the moment, the plan is yes, we're going to do it. You know.
Yeah. Okay. Sean says, "How did you end up in Chicago?"
Much the same reason I ended up in Newcastle, a woman. Yeah, it was, my wife's American, and my first marriage sadly ended in divorce, which that's the one that took me to Newcastle. And my second wife, she's American. She's originally from Washington DC, which is not a city I'm particularly keen on. And when we got together, she actually talked about moving to Newcastle, and but you know, the job she was doing at the time, she was working in website design when that was still a pretty new thing. Said, you know, you're not going to get a job on the Team Valley doing that, love. So, you know, she was like, well, would you move to America? I said, well, yeah, I'm just not a fan of DC that much, you know, to live in. I mean, it's a great city to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there. But I had to be careful because it's her hometown. You can't go slagging it off too much. And so she said, well, you know, is there anywhere you would consider? And I said, well, my two favorite cities are Chicago and San Francisco. And as luck would have it, she saw a job that she applied for in Chicago, and she got it. So that kind of made our minds up for us. Which, you know, subsequently looking back on it and seeing the price of houses and stuff in San Francisco, bloody glad we came here, because I don't afford a shoebox out there, I think. You know.
Keith says, the Jam or the Clash, in your opinion, who do you think was the best band?
The Jam made better records, and they wrote better pop songs. The Clash were probably more important. That's kind of sitting on the fence a bit in it, but yeah, I mean, the Jam definitely made better pop records, and you know, Paul did have his political side, but it wasn't as nailed to the mast as Joe was. And I think in terms of changing people's opinions politically, then the Clash were definitely more important. But in terms of, you know, getting people through the turnstiles, then the Jam were. I mean, they were both fantastic, amazing bands, and you know.
Yep, right, you've answered it. Tom Dixon says, what musical instrument do you wish you'd mastered?
The guitar. So, yeah, I still try to play piano at home, and I've been trying for a couple of years, and I'm just about up to Les Dawson standard now. So,
Eric Morecambe, you're playing all the right notes, but not necessarily in the right order.
Absolutely. I'm not even sure I'm playing all the right fucking notes, to be honest.
Brian Standen says, what is the most hard-hitting song that you have written? Is it 16 Shots, he says?
Certainly recently it is, yeah. Yeah, I mean, 16 Shots is obviously about a very specific incident that happened here in Chicago, for those of you that don't know. It was a young man was... I mean, he was definitely, he was up to no good. It looked like he was trying to steal a car or whatever, but, the police response to his activity was completely out of proportion to what he was doing. I don't think he was necessarily a bad lad. Those that knew him said he was, likely just led astray a bit. Anyway, 9 cops turned up and basically emptied 16 bullets into the kid. And the dash cam footage shows that, he was basically surrendering. He was walking towards them. He did have a knife in his hand, but he was walking towards them. And they could have easily, if they really needed to shoot him, they could have shot him in the knee. And he had dropped the knife anyway after the first shot, and they just carried on shooting. So, it was an appalling misuse of police force. And it shocked the city, it shocked the country. And it was just something that the more even, and I almost tried to forget about it and not write about it, but it kept coming back to me. And it was just something I felt I had to write about.
Yeah, can understand that completely. Last couple of questions. Paul Oxley says, are you going to wear your Newcastle shirt in Sunderland? And it just reminds you that you don't want to get stuck there for 10 days quarantining after the gig.
I don't think you quarantine after the gig, mate. But yeah. Surprisingly, no, I have no plans to wear a Toon shirt. No.
Just do a David Bowie and just walk on and go, good evening, Newcastle. That'll do.
I think David might have got a fool's pardon for that. I think they know I know the region, so I think I'll just
Good stuff. Let's just finish off on football, mate. Your favourite all-time Newcastle player, then who is it?
Peter Beardsley. I know his legacy's been slightly tainted by off the pitch stuff that happened recently, but geez, the things that man could do with a football. And I still remember one goal against Aston Villa where I swear that it looked like the ball was stuck to his feet. He did that shuffle thing that he used to do. Yeah. I think that defender's still wondering where the hell he went to this day. It's like, and again, the view I had of it, because I was on the halfway line, I was like right behind him. I was like, how the fuck did he get past him? And it was always players like that. Beardsley's obviously top of the list, and then people like Solano came after. I loved watching him, and the one that frustrated and got away really was Hatton Ben Arfa, which was just like, again, you'd watch him do things, and you're like, Jesus, this kid is the next Peter Beardsley. Then the next 3 games, he just couldn't be arsed, and you're like, oh, for fuck's sake, it's like. But we've, like you said, for a team that should be solidly in the middle of the table, we've had some cracking players over the time I've watched them. So.
Favorite goal?
Probably the Alan Shearer's favorite goal, the one against Everton.
Oh,
when again, so I remember going back to we used to always meet in Inventions before and after the game. I go back in, and I think everybody's first sentence when they walked in was, "Fuck, he didn't forget to hit that." It was, it's like, if my net hadn't have been in the way, that would have been still going, Yeah, so that was just incredible.
Yeah, fantastic goal. That one, and probably Beardsley's over Joe Corrigan against Brighton in '84 is one that sticks out for me. But some absolute belters. Is there a favourite game that you've actually been to?
There's a couple. Obviously the 5-0 against Man United sticks out. That was just a perfect day, really. And this is going to sound terrible. It was perfect for a number of reasons. One, the wife had gone to visit her mother for the weekend, so I was on my own. So I could stay out and celebrate after the game. So we did. And we ended up in my local pub where I found a tenner on the floor. And just as we thought we were all going home, the landlord said, they're re-showing the entire game in the public bar. Just keep quiet and we'll pull the curtains. We're like, what a day. So that was great. And then obviously the Barcelona home game when, the Tino Asprilla night, that was, I mean, that was the stuff of dreams, really. You're sitting there, you go in and you're thinking, we might scrape a draw against these, and then you go, nah, it's Barcelona, catch yourself on. And then you find you're winning. It's like, fucking hell. And interestingly, actually, Stuart Pearce had just signed for the Toon, and he was a mate. And my wife and I had arranged to go out for dinner with him and his missus the next night. And we're in the cab on the way to the restaurant, and my missus has gone, don't talk about football all fucking night, will you? No, I promise you. Won't even mention it. And like I said, it was the night after the Barcelona game. And we were waiting, we had to wait at the door. We were at 21 Queen Street. We were waiting at the door. And it's like a little cubicle thing before you went into the main restaurant. We're waiting at the door. And the door opens and Piercy and his missus walk in. And before we even say hello, he just looks at me and goes, get in! I went, yeah! So both our wives going, oh, for fuck's sake.
Aye, because Stuart Pearce is a huge punk fan, as we know. So that's no surprise to hear that. Takeover. Are you for it or against it? Are you this particular takeover, the Saudi one? It's split our fans a little bit. You're on social media. You're on Twitter. You'll have probably seen some of our fans arguing over Graham Souness of all things this week. We seem to be very divided. But the takeover. I mean, would you like to see the Saudis come in, or is that something you're against, Jay?
Do you know, it's a really tricky one, isn't it? Because, politically you look at them and you think, no, there's no way on God's green earth you want them anywhere near your club. But then there's the Manchester City fantasy land you could be in.
Yeah.
I think I'd prefer if it was somebody else. But I mean, he actually seems determined to sell to them. I think mainly because he can get the ridiculous price he's asking for it. And again, it's one of those things. I mean, I just want rid of him, really. Just want him to go. As long as whoever takes over has got some ambition. But yeah, I remember when the news first broke, before it all became, the ridiculous political football it's become. And I remember turning to the lad next to me in the bar that we watched the game in here. And I said, looks like he's actually found an owner or found a buyer. And he's like, you're kidding? I said, yeah, he's managed to find the one guy on the planet who could be fucking worse than him. And that just, from a political point of view, it's a very, very difficult, one to answer,
It is. No, it is, mate. It's certainly caused a divide. I mean, our fans don't need much cajoling into falling out with each other on social media in particular. You can always walk away from that, of course. But it is a political football. It's a good way to describe it. This season, obviously, it's been a nightmare for us all in lockdown, not being able to go. I think if we had been, Steve Bruce wouldn't have got the lickings of a dog, I have to say. But your views on Steve Bruce and just essentially the way that he set the team time and time again.
Well, I agree with you. I think he's talked many times about how the crowd would be the 12th man. I think he's very lucky that there aren't 50,000 people in that ground every week. Again, we were talking off air before we started chatting here that I'm just baffled that when I saw the squad. I mean, first of all I was delighted we bought Callum Wilson. I've been a big Callum Wilson fan for years, so I was over the moon when we bought him. But yeah, saw the first game against West Ham, and I thought we should be easily top 10, without blinking this year. And I've just been baffled by him playing players out of position. I think that's the main thing that really bugs me. It's like, okay, we've had a lot of problems with injuries. Nobody's doubting that. But, you saw what Wilson and Fraser did when they were together at Bournemouth, and he's never used, again, they haven't been overly fit all the time, but he's never really used them in those positions. He brings on, when Wilson's injured, he brings on Dwight Gale, who's, and plays him on the wing. I mean, he's not a fucking winger. And even games like, games like against West Brom, right? Now, Dwight Gill was their player of the year last year, scored 23 goals for them. You'd think if one player is going to scare them, it'd be Dwight Gill. Doesn't fucking play him. And it's like, what's he thinking? What goes through his mind? Why does he stick with this diamond thing that, possibly Graham Jones brought in? It worked once. But you've only got to play Football Manager to know the same bloody formation doesn't work every frigging game, You don't need to be managing a Premier League football club to do that. And the man frustrates me because and I'm not sure. God, this is putting my neck on a block. I'm not sure I buy that he's a Newcastle fan either. I think he's from the region. I think it's the public expects him to be a Newcastle fan, and
I think you're right.
It's more of a Man United,
You're preaching to the converted on this show, Jake, because we all believe he's a Man United fan, and to be honest, his dad, big Newcastle fan, but I do think, he's never answered that question, correctly. He's never said, I was a Newcastle fan all my life. I used to wear a black and white strip. He's always dodged it. So I think your gut instinct's right. He had the opportunity to sign for Newcastle, and he did go to Man United. So I think you're right. I think your gut instinct's right on that.
That's down to him, It's down to him,
Yeah. I know. I agree. I just think, unfortunately for us, we're in such a position with this owner that he was 11th choice on the list, and that's what we ended up with, and that says a lot about the state of the club, thanks to the owner rather than Steve Bruce.
Yeah, but again, you look at we had one of the best managers in the world just prior to him, and his best advice on it, and I'm not going to knock the lad, but his best advice on a player like Joe Linton was, he's not worth 40 million, don't buy him. Almost the first thing that Steve Bruce does is, okay, you want him, let's go get him. And and I feel sorry for that lad, because you can see he does try, but again, for the longest time, played out of position. He's not a centre forward. He actually is a winger, and you can see in recent games, when they played him on the wing, and he's managed to get himself in the box. The kid's confidence is shot. I mean, he won't take a shot on. He's always looking for somebody else, and it's I think, I feel sorry for him. I think we've actually put him back a couple of years,
Yeah, I would agree. Big thanks to our sponsor, Spider VPN, for sponsoring last month and this month, sponsoring the StreamYard application. A very apt sponsor for this show as well. Geordie Riffs, premium guitar lessons for beginners and children, guitar repairs and service and recording studio. Follow them on Geordie Riffs Official on Facebook. Their website's geordieriffs.co.uk. Give them a follow on Instagram at Geordie Riffs, and they really want to build up their Instagram profile. Big shout out to qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Walls and Newcastle, and to Jab Signature, who make all of our flyers and our posters. Subscribe to the channel, click the Newcastle Legends button in the bottom right hand corner, hit the like button, hit the share button if you do not mind. And I have one more job for you, Jake, before I let you dodge off to the pub. Could you say... Go on.
I'm just writing down that Geordie Riffs thing to get some lessons. That's all.
There you go. Put it back up.
There you go.
I would like you to say a happy birthday to one of our viewers. His daughter messaged in. Could you say a happy 51st birthday to Gary Miles, please, Jake?
Sure. Gary, happy 51st birthday, mate. All the best. Hope we win the day.
Good stuff. Hey, Jake, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate, to have you on.
Yeah, mine too. Thank you.
Let's hope we win, and good luck with all you're doing, and hopefully we'll get you on again in the future, mate. But take care, stay safe out there, mate, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks, pal.
All the best. Thank you. Cheers, mate.
Talking to myself again, but it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past.